There we go. I had to reset because you know how Windows, when it does updates, it switches all your audio devices. It looked like OBS wasn't recognizing us, but you should be good now, Nathan, if you want to do a mic check.
All right, testing one, two,
Yeah, we're
three.
good. We're
Testing.
good.
All right.
We're good. We're live. All right. I think everything is set up the way it needs to be set up here on the thing. Let me get this out on Facebook, go on Twitter, and then we can retweet. So I'm already out on Discord. We've done the Facebook page. We just did the Twitter post. Although I will tell everybody in advance, I forgot to change the thumbnail on to say YouTube instead of Twitch, so it's all good. I'll change that tomorrow because I herped and derped and forgot. All right, welcome everybody to the 7th episode of Catch of the Day, the podcast where Nathan Napalm and myself, Renfail, talk about various subjects related to RPGs, MMORPGs, and at some point we're going to do a tabletop show episode. And today we're doing a topic that is recent for us because we just did our first raid in World of Warcraft last night with the guild here in Wrath of the Lich King Classic. And we're going to be doing more raids in the future every Wednesday night and eventually probably on Thursday nights as well. The way we do this show is we fish in Wrath of the Lich King. Thank you for the invite. While we're talking about various topics, thus the Catch of the Day theme, and our theme today is Raiding 101. Now let me see where you're at on the map, Nathan, because I need to actually fly up to you.
Okay.
Be there in just a second. This is actually a topic that Nathan wanted to discuss today, so we are doing this one because we just did our first raid last night.
Have a good one.
In Naxxramas. I think it went pretty good.
It did for us. And by the way, we went in blind. We didn't look up strategies, and that was a lot of fun. And I think there's a lot of information to dig out of that. You know, out of how they've done the rating. You know.
I think that we were talking about the way of looking at it and saying, are there looking at it from a newbie's perspective. So I could say one big difference I noticed between World of Warcraft Wrath rating and say EverQuest 2 rating is that EverQuest 2 rating pretty much guides you in the sense that you get quests which very much tell you this is where you need to go. Here's the entry into the zone. Here's the entry quest to get into the zone, and here are some quests for the zone. Now, I haven't seen any of that for Classic so far. The only reason I even knew that Naxxramas existed was because that's everyone's always just talking about. That's the raid for this era. And so it was just for phase 1. So it was just assumed that that's where we're going. But I haven't seen any quests leading up to it. And that's something that I'm kind of missing. Maybe I just don't know about them.
But I bet you it is in here. I bet we just need to talk to some people like Remy D or what have you. I guarantee you there's some stuff to lead you into it. I bet you anything. We should try to look into that maybe next week. Because there's definitely a story happening, you know, and things. So I know there was quests that kind of mentioned Naxxramas as we were leveling up. Did you get to see some of those, Renfell, where it just kind of mentions the bosses? And
yes.
Yeah. So they were kind of building a little bit of story behind it before we got there. But yeah, some quests in there would be pretty nice. Besides a daily or something, like a real quest that takes you there would be cool. But yeah. I found it most interesting because here's what I was afraid of. I was afraid that because we're on expansion 3 and we're just now raiding, right? We didn't do classic raiding. We didn't do TBC raiding. We're jumping right in at Wrath. I was afraid that it would be the type of game where it would expect you to know so much before you even fought the first boss that we would just be lost. You know what I mean? Like, the difficulty would be ramped up, like, as if it's, you know, whatever the hardest one in TBC was, and then this will be even harder than that. And it seems like it's weaning us in. Like, the first fight, not that bad at all. I think we one-shotted it, if I remember right. And then second one, okay, there's some mechanics. Like, we had to figure it out. It wasn't actually that complicated, but until we knew the mechanics, it seemed very complicated. And I can see that that's probably the direction it's going. So it's a good little learning curve for people just jumping in like us.
Well, and I think this goes back to something I said before. I've played a lot of games like you, and like you, I've rated in most games that I've played. I This kind of goes back to the difficulty conversation we had the last time we did an episode because we talked about, is group content challenging? What actually makes group content challenging? And I'm still going to come back to the people component because once we figured out the mechanic during the second fight, which by the way, you streamed it last night. I did not because I didn't want to try to stream and main tank and everything else at the same time. But I did record the episode. It's going out, I think, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Central. That episode goes out. And you'll see us. The first encounter, first try, no problems. It was a fairly standard wave encounter. So we just went in blind, attacked the mob. What does he do? Oh, he summons skeletons. Okay. Kill the skeletons. Okay, he does it again. Kill the skeletons. Oh, and now he teleports up to the thing and to the balcony and summons more skeletons. And then he comes back down, does it again, and it progressively got more. And I feel like it progressively got faster towards the end. I don't know if that's actually the case or if we were just running out of mana. I don't know. But that's definitely a DPS check fight, and we were barely there. Like, it was. I found it very interesting when we were doing the first those gargoyles who do the stone skin or whatever it is, which regens them, because until Grolar switched over to DPS, we were not making that DPS check, which goes to show you that we are. It's not that we're undergeared. We're a little undergeared, but not completely. But it's because we have quite a few people who are there who haven't done enough heroics yet, so they don't have the hit cap. They don't have the gear yet. So, I mean, that's the natural progression of things is you got to run the heroics. You just got 80 last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? But I think you've only ran, how many heroics have you done now?
Like 3.
Yeah, so I mean, you need to run 12, 15, 20 heroics to start to get to the point where you're ready to do that raid. And so we're definitely in there way earlier than most people would go in. But fuck it. I mean, we're doing it for fun. So, but that's the DPS check. So that first fight, we did it. Struggle, not a struggle, but we definitely did it. We got towards the end, burned it down. Now that second fight, I'm not running any parsers, and so that's probably on me for not having run a parser, because if we were running parsers, we would be able to, assuming that we were doing this for the first time, which we were, you and I were. I noticed out of the corner of my eye, you saw people in your chat last night who were like throwing tips at you, and you're trying not to read it, like, nope, don't spoil it for me. And then I'm over here tanking on the platform the first couple of tries, and I see people doing the dance on the floor, and I'm like, they obviously know what's going on. I'm trying not to watch what they're doing because I don't want to spoil it for myself. Once we figured out the mechanic, it wasn't a difficult fight. It was getting the timing down and then just doing it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So once you learned the mechanics, I would argue that it's an easy fight once you know the mechanics.
But I think we'll one-shot it when we do it next week.
Right. And there's always the chance that, someone will, have a hiccup, their internet connection will lag out or something. There's always things that can happen. But the one thing I've always said, no matter what game I have ever raided in, is that raiding, the most difficult part of the raid is going to come back to the people management component, but also the struggle of learning the mechanic if you don't have someone who's there who knows how to already do it. So Muji knew how to run, Maduros could do the explanation, because we threw ourselves up against it 3 times, and we were figuring things out those 3 different times. But the question is, you and I made an agreement before we started with everybody where we're like, look, we don't want to turn this into a 6-hour brick wall scenario. So if we have not figured it out after 3 or 4 tries, let's go ahead and ask someone what's the strategy here so that we can just get it done. But I think that it's fun to try to figure it out. And I can remember the last time I did something where I was doing world firsts was EverQuest 2. And that was very much a scenario where we went in completely blind. There was no wikis, there was no YouTube strategies, nobody had done any data mining. It was go in, throw yourselves at the mob, die, analyze all of the combat stuff, and then figure out, oh, he did this thing, let's try this next time.
Yeah.
By the way, I need to stop talking and go
Or
fishing.
do we have a lot of times too? It's do we have who's in the party? What do we have to counter that? It's usually a little bit of that. I have become accustomed to the WoW style because the last raiding I did was I raided for several expansions in Final Fantasy 14, which does a World of Warcraft style raid. So I'd become accustomed to this, but I'll tell you something I didn't know because it's the first time I ever raided in WoW. Was I thought Final Fantasy 14 stole the ground information from WoW. WoW actually doesn't have that, which makes raiding harder. So if that would have been the same fight in 14, then the goo would have also had a big red marker or something very obvious, and we would have known, we would have seen the area where there wasn't
stand there.
Yeah, we would have figured it out faster, right? So in a way, and people kept telling me that because I argued with several people. I was like, dude, Final Fantasy 14 rating is pretty much what and what with World of Warcraft. And I remember people to argue and they'd say, no, World of Warcraft's harder than 14. And then I'd say, well, how far did you raid? And they'd be like, oh, I just did the first expansion. It's like, well, dude, it's progressed a lot in 14. It's much harder. But now I think I understand why people say that. It's because 14 has all those markers, where in World of Warcraft, you have to figure those out yourself. So I would agree. That does make it harder. It takes you longer to figure it out. You know what I mean?
There's also that, it was the same thing, and I don't know if they've changed it since then, but when I was raiding in EverQuest 2 back in the day, you didn't have any sort of telegraphing on the ground to tell you where to run. It was analyze the data. Oh, everyone got hit. That must mean it's a raid-wide AoE. Or, oh, only the tank got hit, so that's a frontal. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whoever was in front got hit. Those are the types of things that you had to figure out without. If there's no telegraphing on the ground, you have to figure that stuff out. So I think that I'm torn on this because I haven't done raiding in World of Warcraft retail. And I've heard that, for example, Remy has a good point. A lot of games have visual cues. And yes, I think that. And by the way, I think that I don't know if any game has done this. If it has, maybe you could let me know, Nathan, or somebody in chat. But I think a good introduction to raiding, and this is something EverQuest 2 did very well. For those of you who don't know or have never played, they're still in the game these days, but they have city raids, which were these. It started off, here's a two group raid. Now here's a 3 group and a 4 group, and they work you up to 4 group, and each raid is a training raid, which says, okay, this raid is all about burn the mob. This raid is about positioning the mob. This raid is about AoEs. This raid is about splitting mobs apart. This raid is about bringing mobs together. They gave you these tutorial raids, and you earned guild status, which leveled up your guild as you did those quests. So it was great because it was a tutorial on how to raid, and it worked you through, and you also got cool rewards for doing it. And I haven't seen any other game do that, but thinking about telegraphing, I think it'd be pretty cool for a tutorial series to use telegraphing to train you, but then once you're actually in it, the telegraphing's off, and you just have to remember the things that you learned during the tutorial series of how to deal with those mob encounters. But I don't know if any other game has done it that way or not.
14 did something similar. There's these things you can do. They're optional, or they used to be optional at least, where it would train you on all the basics of things that might happen during a raid, so you would know what to do in those. And it's been a long time, so I'm gonna get some things mixed up. But for example, if you're fighting a boss and an eyeball icon spell pops up, which you see the eyeball above the enemy, that means don't look. That means to look away. That means you have to turn your character away, don't look at them, or you're going to get paralyzed or turned to stone or something like that. And it walks you through all the basics.
So it sounds like they did a better job than EQ2
Yeah, it's
did.
really good. It's really good. And you're by yourself, you know what I mean? And it will literally be like, no, you was too late, or that was a little too quick, or whatever. It will literally train you to learn the timing. And then you can just go straight from that and start raiding, and you'll be okay. You won't be garbage. You'll at least know when you messed up and what you did wrong. So I think that's a good way, because I do know that 14 has a very high raiding percentage, and I don't know the numbers, but most people raid in that game.
They've
Like,
made it accessible.
they made it so accessible, yeah. And plus the community, and once again, this is just a weird thing that I don't know why this is, but for whatever magical reason, the community is overall so freaking nice that it hurts. You know what I mean? So you can just go raid and nobody's gonna be mean to you, and you can just tell them it's my first time, and they'll be like, they'll go out of their way to be helpful and etc. So that's a great introductory to what I would call modern raiding.
And the other component to modern raiding, I think, is looking at what World of Warcraft has done in retail, which I have not experienced. I've heard about it. I've been told about it. I'm looking forward to experiencing it because I'm playing retail on Sunday mornings and leveling up my very first character there, which is flex raiding and basically story raiding, or having these multiple tiers of raids where you can go in using the matchmaking system, and it will basically put you in a raid where it is storyline raid. So you're not going there to have a challenge. You're not going there to be banging your head against the brick wall. You're just going to get the story done and to see the cool storyline completed. And then they have the various tiers where, okay, you did that. Now there's the heroic version. And now there's mythical. So if you want that challenge and you're with a good group of people, you can go do that and get the best rewards available in the game by doing it at that level. But I also love the fact that they have the flex rating, which is scaling a raid that scales in difficulty based on how many people you have. Because I'll say this, without getting into stuff, when there's people who can't be there or they go on to do other things, and you had planned for those people to be there, to then have an event planned that you can't do because people didn't show up. It's nice to be able to have. It does suck. It sucks, and a lot of it causes people to be upset. There's feelings that are hurt and around the table, and people's time gets wasted, and But knowing that you could have the flex raid option is amazing to me because no one's time is ever wasted, which means it's a great idea because it just means that Wednesday night, everybody, Wednesday night is our raid night. No matter how many people show up, we're going to do something. End of story. End of story. No matter how many people show up, we're going to go do something. And I think a game having that flexibility of being able to scale the difficulty based on how many people are in attendance is brilliant from a keep as many people playing your game as possible, as often as possible, so that they're not off playing another game. Because that's the number one most important component of an MMORPG is keep the people in the game and playing. I don't know, does Final Fantasy XIV do something like that, or do they still have fixed number raids?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to get into the raids in that game too. I mean, I haven't done it in a long time, so I'm probably giving some outdated information here, but I remember you could queue up for, I want to say you could queue up for any dungeon except for the most current one. So you could do, I mean, I said dungeon, I meant raids. So you could do all the raids all the way up to the most current one just by queuing up. But I will say this, you don't clear a lot of them that way. Because they're not easier. It's just a way to get in a group easier. So the community mostly looks at that. Now, once again, my data might be outdated, but back then when I played, they looked at that as a way to learn, but not to clear it. Now, you would clear it sometimes, but you didn't go in expecting to clear it. You went in expecting, I just want to learn a little bit about the raid and get used to it, and then later when I go with my guild, I won't be a stumbling idiot. So it was used more like a training without having to be embarrassed. You know what I mean?
That's kind of a cool way to look at it.
And everybody in the game pretty much looks at it like that. Like, it was stupid rare. It did happen a couple times, but it was really rare that I would go in one and people would get upset that they didn't clear it. And nobody expected to. I remember people flipping out like, "Oh my god, we actually cleared it. This was a pug group. What the heck?" So sort of the same, but it didn't do what WoW does, where it actually makes it easier knowing it's a pug group. Obviously, you're not going to have the same, connectivity and strategy and communication as you would with a static.
Well, I can also say one thing I really appreciate about what Warcraft has done in retail is making it accessible to as many people as possible, because like you said, Final Fantasy XIV has done a very good job of making it so accessible that the majority of players can actually complete the content, and World of Warcraft has done that as well. Now, I know there is a certain percentage of the player base who is butthurt about that fact because they want raiding to only be for
elite.
them.
Yeah.
But I would argue that you still have that with mythical level content, because just because I'm seeing the story version of it, I'm not going to get the gear that you're going to get.
Right.
I'm not going to get mythical level gear from running the matchmaker version of that raid. I'm going to get some, I don't even know what it is, the blue tier or whatever.
Right. Still good, but it's not, it's
better than quest gear, but it's not
better than quest gear. Right?
It's not heroic, it's not mythical level. So that level of elite content is still there for the players who want it. But you've now made it accessible to more people to be able to get in, because at the end of the day, I think we actually talked about this during the previous episode when we covered toxicity, whether or not there is toxicity, and I think at the end of the day we decided no, it's people that are toxic, and not the games themselves. And one of the components that people often bring up is the hot and sweaty guilds, where they have these impossible standards of recruitment and things if you want to go with them, because that's how it always was in like EverQuest, as an example, back in the day. If you wanted to raid, you kind of just had to accept that if you wanted to be raiding current level content, you had to join a guild of people who were going to be playing hot and sweaty. And that's difficult for some people who consider that to be toxic behavior. I don't consider it toxic. I just consider it to be aggressive, masculine, rah, we're playing basketball, bitch. Like, you're on the opposing team. Like, I'm not here to play nice. I'm here to win. Like,
right.
And for some people that's not the type of gameplay they want. They want to do it in a more casual, relaxed environment. And now they can do that in modern games where we now have the flexibility. And I feel like that's more of an evolution of technology than anything else, because
good point. Yeah.
Companies looked at it and said, well, so many people want to be able to at least see the story. Why don't we make that something that they can actually do?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good idea too, because also it gives you a frame of reference too, right? So instead of just, like somebody doesn't have the time or whatever, and so they can hop on and do that, when, at any point, hop in a queue, get in, see that content. Now they also have reference points when other people are talking about the game, even if they haven't done the mythical version of it, which is going to have extra mechanics, it's going to be harder, etc. But they still get the general reference of the fight. So they can still have a conversation about it. They still, they know what's going on in the story. I just feel like I don't see anything wrong with that. I just think that was probably good, especially when you're in the context of talking about World of Warcraft, right? I can see how people would get more butthurt in another type of game, but World of Warcraft has always been about trying to be accessible and get more people to do the content. Like, it's always been about that. That's what World of Warcraft was invented to be, a more accessible MMO. So it fits perfectly with what they are trying to do.
When you look at raiding, I kind of feel like the evolution of raiding is also the evolution of MMORPGs from my perspective, because we've always had raiding, and in the beginning, in the early days, it was, thinking about the EverQuest, it was always dragons, right? It was dragons and bosses, and then eventually it got to gods, and like when we got to Planes of Power, that was kind of the end of the original sort of main storyline for EverQuest 2, because that's when EverQuest 1, sorry, because that's when they split off and started doing EverQuest 2. But at a certain point, once you've killed the gods, like you've kind of done all there is to do. And I look at, like, with the current World of Warcraft expansion, they've cycled back around to dragons are coming back, right? I feel like that's always like it's either going to be gods or dragons. Even though we've evolved in terms of the mechanics and how accessible raids are, I feel like we always end up coming back to gods or dragons. Which, from a storyline perspective, I get it, because what else can you? I mean, I guess the other analogy of this to be look at the Marvel movies. The bad guys can only get to be so bad before we've seen them all before. Like Thanos was
Yeah.
cool and everything, but who's gonna top Thanos? Oh, well, now we've got this other deity-like figure who's just as powerful as Thanos, and now he's gonna be the main bad guy. And it's like, really, that just once you've done that, it kind of starts to feel a little stale. What are some things in your mind that companies, doesn't matter who it is, or you know, games as a whole could do to change that storyline dynamic to
Yeah,
make raids
you
more
know,
interesting?
and this is a problem that World of Warcraft faced, and I'm gonna refer to it. Before I do that though, real quick, I want to sidetrack because it's an important part of this. Is there is a series that every time there was a major escalation point in the story where it was like a big bad guy for the main character to fight, it seemed like when it was happening, it could not get any crazier than this, right? Like, this is the ultimate. It couldn't get any more epic. And then there would be another one, and then you'd be like, "Oh wow, that makes the other one look silly now." And it kept doing it for like 200 episodes, and that's Dragon Ball Z, man. I think that's the ultimate guide if you want to continue making people feel like this is the peak. No, 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 this is the peak. No, this is the peak. Dragon Ball Z probably did it better than any storytelling I've ever seen, because I remember literally saying that as I was watching it the first time, like, dude, how can we only be this far in this? How could anything be more powerful than this guy? And then it would be, and then it would be, and then it would be, all the way to Majin Buu. So, but that was planned from the beginning, right? So I think that's why World of Warcraft, up to Lich King, most people think was the ultimate, because that was already planned in the story. Now, you can say the Jailers was already in the lore, blah, 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 blah. Sure. But Warcraft 3 set up the story for the Lich King, for Arthas, to be the ultimate thing, right? And by the third expansion, finally, we're not even there yet. We can't go fight the Lich King yet, but we're moving there. He's in the story. It's getting closer, and that was just super epic because they planned it from the beginning. Now, by the time we're up to the Jailer and retail, like Remy D just said in chat, they're kind of just rehashing and trying to just kind of play off of nostalgia, the Lich King a little bit. It's just not as cool because it wasn't planned. I really don't think they thought World of Warcraft would still be churning out expansions 15 years later.
No, that's a good point. I don't think they did. Same with like EverQuest, because EverQuest still puts out an expansion every single year. Have I played it? Nope, not since.
Mm-mm.
I've dipped I think I came in at Depths of Dark Hollow 1. Like, I stopped at Gates of Discord because EverQuest 2 came out, and then I came back around and maybe tried it a little bit, Depths of Dark Hollow, and then that was the last expansion I think that I ever did. And then I've not seen anything since then, nor do I have any desire to see it, because for me, the storyline kind of ended with Planes of Power, because after I took out the gods, I really had no desire to see what's next. Another game I think that is still going but is also facing a similar issue is Lord of the Rings Online, because because that game was always meant to follow the adventures of the Fellowship of the Ring, to take the ring and throw it into Mount Doom. Well, Mordor was, I want to say 3 years ago or something, like maybe 2019, I think 2019, 2020. So since the Mordor expansion, they've finished the main storyline. So everything that Lord of the Rings Online has been doing since then, for raids and otherwise, has been sort of going into the appendices of the Lord of the Rings and kind of going back in time and doing like the story of Durin's folk and these ancient battles with the dwarves that are mentioned in the appendices, because they do have the rights to that content, because they've already told the story of that main arc. So once you've finished up the main arc, you're kind of out of things to do at that point, which brings this is something that's very interesting, because one of the things that I think people struggled with when Saga of Lucimia was still in development was the fact that I was openly telling people in advance that the game had a limited storyline, that I was going to write the first 4 books, and then after the end of the 4th book, that was it. And so the game was going to follow the story of those 4 books over the course of like 10 to 12 years, and then that was it. I did not plan for that game to go on into infinity. I openly told people that the game will have an end. This MMORPG will have an end, and when it comes to that end, it's either going to get sunset, or we will work something out with somebody who wants to pick it up as a licensing deal and carry it on from there if they wanted to maintain the game. But we would then go off and work on another game or a sequel or something else. And I know some people struggled with that because they were like, you can't. No, the MMORPG needs to go on forever. And it's like, why? I don't like the idea of a game that just keeps trying to go on forever. It's like a TV show that just won't end. It's like, guys, come on. You've already told these stories 500 times. And once the story gets stale for me, I kind of take myself out and I'm no longer interested. We were looking.
Yeah, most people do.
We were looking at the numbers the other day because they canceled Westworld after fourth season, and it was a surprise move. But if you look at the numbers, you know, it went from being HBO's golden child when it launched to it lost 75% of its audience during season 2 and 3, basically, but mostly during season 3. It just completely lost the plot, and the reason was because it started off being about the park, Westworld. You know, this wild, wild west where these robots live and these sick, disgusting people come in and rape and pillage and, you know, treat robots like it's bad, you know. And then by the second season, we're getting out into the real world, and you've taken them out of the park now, and the story is no longer about the park. And people kind of went, well, if it's not about the park, I don't, you know, the story's not there anymore. I
don't want to be here for that. Yeah.
I don't want to be here.
They
for
already
this.
seen what they wanted to see, right? Basically. Like,
And
they came expecting something, they got the something, and now they're like, well, I got what I wanted out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the struggle for a lot of MMOs, I think, with raids in particular, because the stakes can only get so high, and once you've done that, then you're just rehashing, whether it's old storylines or you're rehashing a different theme, and that's fine if, and this is the key word, if it is a compelling story, then people will continue. And I would argue that if you look at Final Fantasy XIV as an example, they have maintained a compelling story all along the way. And
but you know what? But you know what I gotta say about that because I love Final Fantasy 11, right?
Right.
And that's why I was excited for 14 back in the day. But one of the things I thought of actually when 14 was out was I was like, this game will have an ending. And you know what? They did just wrap up the entire story arc for everything so far with the last expansion. They wrapped it up all nice and neat. Now they're making another expansion, but it's a new story arc. But the reason I'm saying is 14 will have an ending. The day will come where they're like, all right, not to say we're not going to still release content, guys, but there won't be expansions anymore. The day will come because that's exactly what they did with Final Fantasy 11. Still gets new content, but no new expansions.
Can you explain that to me? Because I have no frame of reference for Final Fantasy 11. So when you say it doesn't get any more expansions, but it still gets content, what do you mean?
Sure. What I mean is like, so based on the end game content they have now, some of it's raids, some of it's just like, I mean, I'm not there, so it's hard to talk about, but I know enough. They just add more, so you'll get new places to go, you'll get new quests to do, and it just kind of fills out more details of the story that was already told. There's no brand new bad guy or brand new big evil threat or anything. All that's been squashed, right? So a lot similar to what you're talking about Lord of the Rings.
I was going to say it sounds a lot like Lotro, yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of like that, but Lotro will still probably do expansions, right? Actually, they did announce one.
Well, it's like a mini expansion, and it's still a prequel. It's like a
chapter.
Yeah, but it's like a chapter from the story before the ring got thrown into Mordor. So it's like they're going back into the appendices to pull. They're like fleshing out more little details as opposed to pushing the story forward. Because once you've thrown the ring into Mordor, that's the end of the Lord of the Rings. Like Tolkien didn't write anything after that, so they have a
and
hard
thank
stop.
God, by the way, they didn't try to. They could have tried to do something real cheesy.
They could have tried to write the novel that Tolkien never wrote, like Rings of Power.
Yes, indeed.
Oh man, that's a whole nother struggle bus, man.
And I'll be honest, that's what I feel like the Blizzard has had to do, right? Like I'm not even giving them any, like I'm not talking crap here. I don't think they had a choice, right? They they don't have the same writers. They don't have the same team they had back during all the way up to Wrath of the Lich King. It's a new team, and they've had to try to compete with, to be honest, a really stellar, very just cutting edge for the time team of developers who made those excellent stories and gameplay, and they just have had to compete with that, and that's not easy to do, right? Like they had fire in a bottle, and then they've had to try to somehow extend that fire over 15 years. That's not an easy task.
I would say that's definitely something. If you look at and people will call it, franchise fatigue, but
yeah,
I would also argue that like Star Wars: The Old Republic, not Star Wars: The Old Republic. My brain went somewhere else. Star Wars as a whole, or Star Trek as a whole, are franchises that have been around for 40 years now, 40, 50 years. And in both cases, the original creator is no longer there to helm the franchise, Sure. So in both cases, I feel like we've gotten this thing where there was the initial magic in a bottle when the original creator was there, and then for whatever reason, Roddenberry died, George Lucas decided to retire. It has been difficult but not impossible to recapture the magic that was there, that genie in the bottle stuff that was there during the earliest incarnations when those became genre-defining intellectual properties, because we've seen so much other content come out since then that sometimes you're gonna have something comes out that feels like a pale imitation of something else, even if it is its own thing within the universe. But I would also argue that someone made a very good comment the other day, and I may have mentioned this to you or on this show. I always forget where I say things because you and I are live all the time, and it all blends together. All Star Wars is good Star Wars. It's just that some Star Wars is better than other Star Wars. And I was like, I'm using that quote everywhere now because it can apply to Star Trek. It can apply to World of Warcraft. It can apply to any franchise that's been out for a while where it's all good, but some is better than others.
Best.
Right. It's like, there are going to be peaks and valleys, and that's normal.
I think that as humans, we just naturally think that because it's the newest one, it should have learned all the lessons before it, and therefore it should be better. But in reality, the brand is just that. The people making it are they change. The people directing, the people producing, the people developing, those human beings change. So, like, they haven't necessarily learned all the lessons along the way, But I think that that's natural for humans to think that the newest should be better, right? We're kind of just trained that way. And you know what? I blame Super Mario Brothers 3 for that, because that was peak 2D platforming, man.
Wasn't that the one with the raccoon tail where you could fly?
Yes.
That was so good.
Yeah. It was just chef's kiss, like final Mario on the Nintendo, third one. Here you go, masterclass. And I think from that point forward, we were just like, hey, sequels should be like crazy better than the ones before it. And I'll say this, and I know a lot of people, I'd say almost everybody disagrees with me on this. It feels like I liked the new Star Wars movies.
I'm
sorry. I liked them. I had a lot of fun watching with my kids. They were excited about it. They'd seen the old Star Wars.
Are you talking prequels or the Disney ones?
No, I'm talking about the Disney movies.
So I'm glad you said this because my little nephew, who is like what, seven years old now, his favorite movie of all time is The Last Jedi, and which is the second of the new.
I'm not surprised.
They have their good points, and this is what I always come back to.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will say, "Well, Tim, you're constantly pissing all over Rings of Power on your YouTube channel." I'm actually not. If you actually sit and listen to my videos, I talk all the time about how the titles are rants, they're discussions. We may be nitpicking because we're fans and we love the intellectual property, but at the end of the day, I always remind people, it doesn't matter if we don't like everything that Rings of Power does, because the one thing it is doing, which is a good thing, it's bringing more fans to the books, which in turn builds the audience and brings more people to Middle Earth. And that is never a bad thing. And the same thing can be said of all the Star Trek stuff that's out on Paramount Plus, which I think is great. I know a lot of people like Star Trek Discovery. That's not, I didn't vote for it. I don't like it. It's got trans people on it. I'm like, it's not my Star Trek. I need, I want Captain Kirk. I don't like the Kelvin timeline because J.J. Abrams sucks balls. Like, people always have these reasons why they hate these new versions, and it's like, well, maybe nitpick if you want. There's nothing wrong with nitpicking. I mean, I love my wife. I love my wife. My wife's a great cook, but sometimes I'm gonna nitpick, and she's gonna do the same to me. Like, man, you undercooked that. You didn't season it up. What the hell? This isn't as good as last time. Not that I would ever say that to her, but I have literally been told, you fucked this up. What did you do wrong? And I was like, oh, I forgot to put garlic in it or something.
Yeah.
But the point is everything is. Sometimes she is, Sparrow. Everything is always going to be judged, and ultimately, it's okay to have it be judged, because that also helps things get better. But I didn't mean to sidetrack. I also, like you...
No, that's good.
I enjoy the new Star Wars films because they're Star Wars. And I may not
they're
like...
not my favorite ones,
no,
but I like the enjoyable films. They're well done. They continue the story. I liked them. They felt very Star Wars to me. At no moment watching any of the new ones from Disney was I like, this isn't Star Wars. That never happened to me. Now, did I disagree with some story moments? Yes. Did I get pissed when they killed Han Solo so quickly? Heck yes, I did. I was steaming mad.
Spoiler alert!
Still, at the end of the day, I was like, hey, that's what happened. That's the way I look at it. Like,
yes.
Well, that's what happened. Things happen that you don't like, right? Like, stories don't have to go the way you want them to go sometimes. Like, I'm okay with hating that. You know what I mean? I will hate it forever, but I'm okay with that. 'Cause guess what? That's what happened. And it actually made me hate the enemy of the story even more, because I was like, you got to be kidding me. You killed... Oh, stop, like you didn't know that.
Yeah.
Stop it. Like I spoiled it. You're on the internet, sir. You knew that. Yeah, just crazy. But I want to say this, too. Sometimes things age better than they... Now, I do not think this is going to be true for Rings of Power, but they age better than they were when they were released. For example...
the prequel films. Or that as well. Or that, yeah.
I remember people complaining about... I remember people complaining. Wait, I'm getting mixed up. Not Captain Kirk. Let me back up. I remember people complaining about Picard.
Yes.
And being like, I don't like him. Star Trek ain't great no more. You got to watch the original. I remember that, and that was back when I was watching Next Generation and loved it, and people being like, "Oh, that's garbage. That's nothing. That's not real Star Trek." But look how it's aged now, right? Even Star Wars 1, 2, and 3.
I was going to say the prequel films were reviled when they came out. But over time, and you can listen
But now look, they've aged okay.
And if you listen to like Ewan McGregor and all the people who worked on those films, Hayden Christensen, they talk about how when those movies came out, they were reviled, and they were not received well by many fans. They still became critically acclaimed films, and they made a lot of money, and they made the franchise even bigger and better. But at the time, like, the kid who played Anakin Skywalker, legitimately, maybe he had other issues growing up, but he was ridiculed so much. Little Annie, he literally has spent his entire adult life in a psych ward. Like, he's legitimately a psychopath who has like done horrible things to himself, and many people say it's because of the way he was ridiculed as a child. The guy who played Jar Jar Binks spent years suffering from serious, like, suicidal, like, people like literally wanted him to die in a fire because they hated Jar Jar Binks so much. And yet he was just an actor paid to do a gig. And
he didn't even write the
Misa no writing the shit, right? And here we are, 20 years later, and now forgiven him and realized that, actually those prequel movies were actually pretty good, even though they may have had some inconsistencies. Like, what are you thinking with your midichlorian shit, George? You've taken the mysticism out of the Force, but whatever. It's his story. He gets to do that. I do want to spin back around real quick, because I got thinking about this while we were sitting here fishing. One of the things in terms of rating, apart from storyline, because storyline is a great reason to get you in and have you want to do this content, right? It's the point A to point B is solo, B to C is group content, and then C to Z is going through the various tiers of raid and completing the whole series of the story that is offered by the game. It's kind of like another way to look at this would be, you take the Marvel TV shows, like Agents of Shield. Those are like um, the that's the basic group level content, and then you've got Daredevil, that's like heroic content, and then you have the Avengers, that's like the raid level content. Looking at it in that manner, something I feel like we still haven't done enough of is the expansion on mechanics, because it still very much is a group of people get together and they go into a dungeon and they fight big bad bosses. And there's varying different types of mechanics and things and scripted events that happen during that, but it still essentially is always about the combat. And one of the things I was working on with Saga of Lucemia, and I don't know that any other game is doing this because it's so intensive, and I just don't know that it's something any commercial game would ever want to do. But I really wanted to see crafting be a component, and I also wanted crafting raids to happen. So as much as you always have adventuring raids, why can't there be a crafting raid? And the example I always had in my mind was you go into a castle and your objective is to secure that castle and defend it for X amount of time, right? But in order to defend it, your adventurers need to be at the bridge defending against the oncoming waves of attackers, while your crafters are behind the adventuring party trying to repair the portcullis and getting the winches working so that you can raise the bridge to, secure the fort and win that encounter, to win that raid. And I've never seen a game blend it like that.
You just named why one of the big reasons. I don't talk about a lot because I'm a combat guy, right? But you just named one of the big reasons why so many people love Dark Age of Camelot. Because you could use your crafting professions to help the war effort, right? You could go repair the door. So there'd be crafters so good that the enemy literally couldn't bust down the keep door because they were repairing it faster than they could damage it. Like you could literally have crafters so good that they could actually win the whole fight. Like, you just chill in the castle and the crafters are sitting there freaking, you just run out and get them supplies, you know what I mean? Like, keep them full of wood so they can keep repairing this door. And that's your job as a non-crafter. And there was more to it than just that, but like, that was a big part of that game, a big secret recipe that a lot of other games that tried to copy the formula for Dark Age Camelot left that part out. Probably because it's hard to program, I don't know. Or they just didn't realize that was a fun mechanic. I don't know, but I don't think any other game did that again. And it was a very cool component to the PvP, and PvP was in game in that game. You know what I mean? It had some raid bosses, but when you went out into the frontiers to defend your round, that was the end game and still is for Dark Age Camelot. So they did it a little bit, but not to the point you're saying, like raising bridges and like all that. They didn't do that, but they did it where crafters came in and they were every bit as important as people out there doing the combat.
I didn't. I was just thinking about it because as you're explaining this. By the way, I've noticed that my internet is being crappy, and they're doing it again recently. So if we suddenly disappear, everybody, never fear. I'm recording this behind the scenes. We will get a full version up if it decides to cut out for some reason. Lord of the Rings Online did introduce, I think they're called expeditions. Man, I think it was like after Helm's Deep or during Helm's Deep, which I don't know if you can do them at the raid level, but you definitely could do them solo or you could do them with a group. And they're like 45, they could be like 45-minute encounters. And the way it works is that during that encounter, there's lots of different, like this is, all right, now, but you have to be doing both. But it's basically like, here's a wave of attackers. You need to do this. Now, you can either go out there and face them and kill them, or you can build catapults and things on the walls, but you got to spend points to be able to build faster and repair faster and to use resources better. So it's like a crafting element that can be done with and in line with adventuring at the same time, which is similar but not the same as what you were just explaining about Dark Age of Camelot.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I think that that's probably way too complex for most companies to want to take a look at because of just how much engineering time it would take. Because the standard that we've seen so far, which works, is we just make mobs more challenging and we add some cool scripted encounters to a dungeon and give it it's a god or it's a dragon or it's a big bad guy of some type, and that's good enough to get a game out and have it make money. And I feel like that's sort of this standard. It's kind of like the Marvy Moval template, It's like just
Yeah.
this works, it makes money, let's do another one.
Very true. Very true. I'm not sick of that formula yet, but it would be nice for somebody to blend in some other components and get more people involved. I think that would be really cool. Like it'd be cool if you just made a raid, right? Where if you have high level crafters that come with you, it's not necessary, but it would make the fight smoother. You know what I mean? Like they could do things like repair a door or whatever and keep out the ads. You know what I mean? Until you're ready for them, or the better at crafting they were, the longer they could hold off the ads. Or I don't know. That would be really cool if somebody would take that, make it not needed, but it would make things smoother if you did do those things. You know what I mean?
Archbishop was saying opening the AQ gate in WoW was kind of like a crafting raid again event, which I'd never done it, but I read up on this, which this was the server-wide thing. Everyone's contributing to putting in resources to. I mean, it's similar, but it's not the same thing. But that was more of a community-driven thing, which brings up another good point that might be interesting to see, which is bringing more community-driven. Not community driven, but GM led events that could be turned into raids, because I don't think that's really something that's ever been done before.
That never happens anymore. I think that Ultima Online did some where like UFOs attacked Britannia one time. There was a couple of times where they sent big nasty mobs in and all high levels had to come fight them off and stuff like that. And I want to say that's maybe the last time I've seen that done in a released MMO.
Yeah, I can't think of the last time I've seen since like maybe EverQuest 1. The reason for that is just because it's engineering intensive and it's costly because you have to spend money on the people who are going to run the events, to write it, everything else,
Sure.
And to make it come off as something more than just cheesy. Because I remember we did our own things in EverQuest too, where it's like, I remember writing storylines and being like, our guild members played the parts of the NPCs, and then we would host the event for everybody who wanted to participate on the server, and we'd have 300-400 people participate on a Saturday afternoon for like 6 hours, and it was basically just our own little role play event, but there was nothing special about it. There was no VFX, no scripted encounters. It was just, here's a script that I wrote. These 10 guild members are playing the roles. They have their script. They're acting like NPCs, and they've got these 6 things that they say to the participants, and then they go through the storyline and they get to the end and we give them some cool rewards. I don't know that I've ever seen outside of like EverQuest 1 and I guess a limited degree World of Warcraft, and as you mentioned Ultima Online, just those original first generation sort of MMOs that did Star Wars Galaxies ever do anything like that or not?
It's kind of, it feels like they would have, but I didn't play the game enough back when it was big to know. But it feels like a game where they would have. But I just don't know. Why is it, I'm just going to say it this way, why is it that things like that have to be, they have to be from an indie team? Why do we never hear, because here's the way I look at it. Wouldn't it be easier for a big company like Bethesda or Blizzard, or wouldn't it be easier for them to get some of their people the tools they need to run events on different servers simultaneously than it would be for an indie team?
Oh, definitely.
But every time I hear something about that's from an indie team saying like, we're going to try to run GM events and blah, 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 MMO we don't talk about on the show, for example, did something. I wasn't there for it, but they did a GM event. They did two.
Yeah, it
Why is
wasn't.
it the indie developers? Why? It
Yeah,
seems like it'd be
I
easier.
saw the ones that they ran, and it wasn't any more than what
It
I
wasn't
just.
what you're talking about.
No, it
It's
was
not what you're
literally
talking
it
about.
was
But
what I just explained of EverQuest 2. They just played the role of some things and did
mhm,
like a role playing
right,
event, which is great. That's GM,
yes,
GM's doing something with the community,
still
but
exciting. Yeah,
it can be exciting. But yeah, it's not quite the same thing as like trying to run some sort of big zone world or worldwide event, kind of like I remember like the plague was a big thing at some point in EverQuest 1, and everyone got sick. And then there was also the plague in World of Warcraft, and I think the CDC or the World Health Organization actually looked at the way the plague spread during the AQ event in World of Warcraft because or maybe it was the Lich King event. I don't remember. One of the plagues, the way it spread was so lifelike that they actually looked at that data and said, "Oh crap, this is actually valuable for us to look at and say, can this be applied to real world scenarios?"
yeah.
I
Oh
can't
yeah, I
think
forgot
of a
about
game
that.
that's
Yeah.
done it for a very long time. I can honestly think it's because it's so costly from an engineering standpoint to make something like that happen that it's just they don't consider it to be worth the time, because I think not enough of the community, at least if you do it for raids, not traditionally not enough people have ever been at that cap to participate. So you're it's like you're producing content for 5% of the population. That's not worth it. However, as games have evolved and they have started to make content accessible to more and more people by making, flex rating and different tiers and all this other stuff, I feel like we might be getting to the point where, who knows, we could see something happening in the future. I don't know, but it would be really cool if we did. Um,
I agree.
because I'd like to see raids be more than just your guild. It would be cool to see big worldwide events where everyone participates, kind of like the old AQ event in World of Warcraft. But that's also something that takes. I would argue that takes dozens of employees to make happen, and indie teams just don't have those resources at their disposal because you're going to need a team of, 20 world builders, VFX artists, you know, graphics programmers and asset builders to be able to come up with the stuff that you want to be able to put in. You might only need 5 writers, but then you also need just sound design and sound effects and I mean, there's so many things that go into it. It just becomes this thing where suddenly it's a $15 million proposal.
And not to
Um,
mention the absolute catastrophe it can cause to a server if
oh,
everybody really does come out for it. I mean,
not
but
only that,
here's
but even Wrath of the Lich King, when it launched, we couldn't complete the cinematic storyline stuff because once you got to Stormwind, the NPCs just locked up. And that's like, it was that way 20 years ago or whatever it was when it first came out. It's not 20 years ago, but when it came out like 10 years ago, it was like that. And it still is bugged today. And it's still, not today, but, when it launched, again, it was still there. And they did fix it after they patched. But it's like you would think that company with $1 billion budget would be able to fix a tiny little thing like that, but even they have hiccups because once you start throwing big things into the game, one little syntax error can throw all sorts of wrenches
yeah,
into the works. Food for
very
thought.
true.
Um, we're an hour in, so I think we've gotten a good chunk out of this. So, are there any other things that we could think about raid wise that we would want to add to the equation, or anything else we haven't covered thinking about raids?
No, I think that what when it comes to rating and things like that, I think overall just the formula of that you do have to cooperate, and as we had already discussed on a previous episode, the hardest component being the people management. That I think that is, I like it. I think it's a lot of fun. I think that there's definite, like almost infinite entertainment out of doing that, because even when your group masters it, I always also found it fun to go back and run it with people who get there later, right? So we'll have Sparrow, Bounty, Joey, they'll be coming in at a later point after we're at some other point in rating, but it will be cool to run it with them also because it'll be new
It's
to
the
them,
mentorship.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's also a very fun part of raiding is
Well,
bringing new people,
oh
letting them
God, see,
experience
you
it.
did just bring up this could be its own topic, but I think what something you just touched on, um, not everyone is cut out to be the mentor because it does take a
Yeah,
certain it takes a certain personality to want to be a mentor, to be willing. This is very important. To be willing to shepherd in the next generation or the next lower rung of people because one of the things that was discussed around people deciding to go their own way recently with what we were doing was some people, I want to be raiding now, I want to be doing it now. Those people they don't have the mentor mentality. They don't have the mentality of I'm here to help others. And that's okay. Not everyone needs to have, everybody's got, I don't pay your sub, you don't pay my sub. So we got to understand that. And as long as we're all on the same page on that, that's okay. But it does take a certain type of person to be willing to take the new person along and be willing to share in that joy that they experience when they get to do it for the first time. Because there is a special sort of wonder to be had there and a special sort of experience that can be shared between people when you're willing to put yourself out there. And that is something that can make raiding far more enjoyable and about more than just the gear or the we got to get it done while it's current. We got to go. We got to go. We got to go. Because the next one's coming in 2 weeks. We got to be ready. We got to hit cap so that we can be ready to hit that next raid the day it comes out. That's one way to do it. And the other way is let's do it once a week. Take our time, learn things, and shepherd in new people along the way. This is also something that, in terms of rating, I feel like because of the way it was always done before, was that hot and sweaty was the only way to do it, which we
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
touched on earlier in the
And they were the
episode.
only people doing it, like so. It was almost like it was gatekeeping. It was gatekeeping, because a lot of people that weren't that way, they were afraid to do it because they knew they weren't that type of person. So they were like, "Well, I guess that content's not for me."
Right.
And I feel like we're far enough along now that barriers begin to fall, and I think that's a lot thanks to um, retail doing the whatever you said it was called with the
Flex rating, yeah.
story flex rating, the LFR system, and also Final Fantasy 14, just trying to wean everybody into that as if because sometimes a lot of times actually I've had people and we beat like because Final Fantasy 14 has like raids where it's like like a dungeon, like you go in, there's bosses and there's final boss, and then they also just have where it's just a boss. Like that's the raid. You zone in, there's the boss, you fight the boss. You know what I mean? And it's mechanics, it's multiple phases, it's a full-on raid fight, but there is no trash, it's just the boss. And I remember many times we would grab up people and go do it, and the way that Final Fantasy 14 would just weave that into the story, they didn't even know it was a raid. They'd be like, oh my god, I didn't even know I was raiding right now. Like, I don't normally raid an MMO. It's like, well, guess what? You do now. Now you do. Now you do raid. You just did a raid. And I feel like that barrier over the years has dropped, and it's not just sweaty people anymore. Everybody can raid. Maybe not at the cutting edge when the content's even new, but during that expansion, I feel like everybody can do it if they want to.
I'm really looking forward to, and I might have a different mentality after I experience it, because I have not yet gotten to the point. I literally, this past Sunday, I woke up early and I played retail for like 4 hours on a Sunday, and I got to level 36 or 37, and I actually unlocked the first official dungeon, or at least the storyline got me to the first dungeon in Battle for Azeroth, and I was really excited, but I was at the end of my stream and I was like, I'm just going to save this for the next time I play, because I haven't actually gotten to experience the matchmaking system in Modern Warcraft yet. So I was really looking forward to being able to go into that, and I'm really looking forward to being able to get further along in the storyline into like Battle for Azeroth and then Shadowlands and see if there's some pick up raids. So I'm looking for raid system. I want to see that because I've heard a lot about it. I've not
Yeah.
gotten to experience it firsthand, so I'm really looking forward to being able to see that. To be able to just be the fly on the wall. I'm just here doing my own little
Yeah.
stream. I don't have anybody, no pressure. I'm just here doing a storyline. Be able to see it from that perspective because even the way we're doing it, Classic still has some expectations of you. Like
Sure.
we have to have X amount of people for one. Two, there's a
Yeah.
hit cap that you have to have. There are minimum requirements to get in and do the content. Or we just like a perfect example was Stick. Was it Sticks or Growlar? I forget. I think it was Growlar last night. Switching their spec over from heals to DPS, and just that one person being geared up enough and switching from a DPS or a heal spec to a DPS spec was enough to push us past. And then you can look at that and go, well, imagine if the 4 people on the raid who were newly 80s and are just barely high enough on their hit rating to be able to even hit the mobs in the first place, but they're still missing a lot. Imagine what it's going to be like when they've done 5 or 6 heroics and they've gotten more gear and it gets faster, and then we get more gear drops and then we get faster, and it just, there is still that aspect to Classic where that's gone in retail because of the tier system. So I would say that even the way we're doing it can be challenging, because there are minimums that you have to hit, and that could be a struggle for some people. Based on time restrictions. Because really, I feel that that's the only restriction we're at right now with raiding in Warcraft is it's a time restriction. It's, do we have enough time to play enough hours to get the heroics that we need to do to get the gear that we need to do to go do the raids, and then getting everybody together on a certain night. Beyond that,
Absolutely.
are raids really challenging? I think everybody's got a different opinion on that.
I will say this because I just found out, and this is still in-game content, so still a little relevant. I just learned yesterday that battlegrounds can be done from anywhere. You can just queue right up. There's a PvP
In retail
thing
or
you click.
Classic?
In Classic, you just click the PvP. You can tell it gives you a bonus if you just say, I'll do any kind. You know what I mean? I'll do a random battleground, or you can pick a specific one.
I'm looking at it right now. Holy shit, you can. Join battle.
You sure can. Just do it whenever you want. And it's very active. I was queuing up, especially if you do the random. Even if you don't, even if there's a specific one, because you can go get a quest in Dalaran in the silver. You know where the portal is.
Yeah.
Am I telling the truth here? No.
No. It's the.
I am, but I'm getting mixed up though. Actually, in Stormwind, if you go over into Old Town, right there where the what's it called, the S7 building is.
Yeah.
As you run up to that in Old Town, make a right. There's a building there. It's got all the PvP where you can spend your honor points, but also has a guy you can get a quest from daily, and it's for like, this specific battleground, win it, and you get a bunch more honor points. But in any case, it's the only thing you can queue up for in Classic right now, is you can do battlegrounds, and it's people from all servers, which is fair. It's PvP, good lord, the waiting time it would be if we had to wait for Horde on our server,
How's the SBMM?
What's that?
How's the SBMM in Warcraft Battlegrounds?
What do you mean?
I was making a stupid joke. Skill-based matchmaking. Because I have been watching Tim the Tatman and Dr. Disrespect just melting and crying about how they're not able to wipe the queues anymore because they're actually being forced to play with players at their own skill level. And they Tim the Tatman literally said, "I'm no longer going to stream Modern Warfare 2 matchmaking because of skill-based matchmaking." That's because you're not that good of a player. You actually you're getting enjoyment out of being able to go into a game and wipe the floor with a bunch of noobs. And the fact that you can't do that now because they're forcing you to queue up against other skilled players, it's like those guys are having meltdowns right now. And I watched a beautiful TikTok about this the other day of a guy who has a very casual, he's like, "Look, man, I work a 9-to-5 job. When I come home, I want to be able to log into Modern Warfare and go, I want to do a battleground, and I want to be able to actually get some kills. Like, I actually want to be able to feel like I'm good. What I don't want to do is log in and get my ass handed to me over and over and over and over because some no-life streamer who only does this for their day job is going to wipe the floor with me every time. So I love skill-based matchmaking because it means that I'm going to get to go up against other players who are my skill level. So when you're talking about battlegrounds, I don't even know if they do that here or if they just lump you all together and you just get points for participation.
I will say this. I don't know about that. I know I had fun and I got my butt spanked, you know, because a lot of them I didn't even know what the goal was. Like, I had no idea what was even happening. I was like, I just follow what everybody else does and I'll figure it out along the way. But then I'd have matches where I get back in one I recognize. I'm like, okay, now I understand what to do. But I will say this about retail, and it maybe I just got really lucky, but I doubt it because we're talking about over years. I always found that somehow magically on retail, I would queue up in this stupid old content, and more often than not, I'd be in a group with a bunch of people who it was their first time too. I don't know how the hell they do that, if it's mixed into like, look for these first or something.
It very well could be that they actually have this skill-based matchmaking and we just don't know
all the time, dude. It happened all the time, dude. I mean, it would blow my mind because I'd be afraid, like, oh god, I'm gonna get with a bunch of tryhards and they're gonna be a max level and I'm gonna be annoying, and that did happen some. But most of the time, dude, I'd be shocked at how many times I go in and people would be like, I'm new. This is my first time, let's run slow, you know? And I'm like, oh, thank God, you know? So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Not every time, but more times than not, that does seem to happen in retail.
Interesting.
From my experience. Yeah, I got to where I used to, like, almost get anxiety, because I hate doing things I'm not good at, right? I really don't like to do things I'm not good at. You won't catch me out playing basketball. Why? Because I tried it and I sucked at it. And I was like, you know what? This ain't for me.
I've been there.
You might catch me tossing a football because I can throw, right? But you're not going to catch me playing basketball because I freaking suck at it. I'm so bad, I just won't do it, you know? So I do have that anxiety sometimes. Like, I don't want to suck, you know? But it feels like retail takes care of you on that. Everybody sucks if you suck.
Well, I think at the end of the day, everybody, the old way of raiding is gone. I'm very happy for that. I much prefer the new way of raiding where everybody can get in, do it at their own speed, at their own pace. If you like World of Warcraft and you want to raid in a casual manner, I would say that our doors are always open. Last night was literally our very first official 10-man raid in World of Warcraft, Classic Wrath of the Lich King. We're going to be doing it every Wednesday night moving forward. And on the nights when we might not have 10 people, we're going to go do heroics and help people get gear. And as more people get to 80, we will slowly be building up. And if enough people stick around past the holidays, we may look at expanding upon that and maybe even getting into 25-man raids into the new year. But for the meantime, we're on the Peggle server, Alliance side, if you want to come join us. Traditionally, we play Wednesday nights for raids, and then Thursday nights are the multi-streams. I also play on Tuesday nights and Sunday mornings. Nathan plays a couple times throughout the week from here and there in between all his other stuff. Tonight, I think there's a Pantheon event, so Nathan will not be playing. So our multi-stream is not going to be happening tonight, but I should be streaming anyway with my brother, assuming my internet doesn't crap out on me. But I should be playing with my brother tonight, and I'll have a stream up on my personal YouTube channel here in a little bit. But I would say, if you're here tonight and you liked what you saw, we are going to be streaming exclusively on YouTube now. That's for everything. We're no longer doing anything with the Twitch channel for the Weave in the Void. So make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon here on youtube.com/The Weave in the Void. We're doing this on Thursday nights. We're also doing on Sunday nights. We have the Weave in the Void live stream campaign. I apologize in advance. The episode that we did on Sunday night, I have not pushed to YouTube yet. Usually do that on Wednesdays. But Chris and I had emergency issues with our 2 kittens who got spayed. And so we had to do emergency surgeries. And there was like 48 hours where we didn't get any sleep, which was Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'll be pushing that live tomorrow for everybody who missed the live stream last Sunday. But moving forward on Sunday nights, we'll be here on this YouTube channel. So don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all those good things. And more importantly, I would say, because the way we have this structured is that myself, Nathan, Sparrow, Bounty, Skinny, my brother, and my wife, it is a partnership here, and we're all trying to build this into something that is going to become a bigger and better business, and hopefully bring an income for everybody above and beyond simply, ad revenue. So do us a solid. If you like what you hear, share it out with your friends. Share it out in your Discord communities. Share it out to your gaming communities and beyond. Anything you see here that you like, it helps out. And then eventually, when we get to 1,000 subscribers, we actually can monetize this channel. So this is a new objective here for us, is we want to get to 1,000 followers. So make sure you share this out with as many people as you can. Help us to get to that 1,000 minimum. YouTube has exciting things coming in the pipeline for next year. We just got the word, I think it was 2 days ago. Shorts get monetized in February. The new terms and conditions are coming in January. So big things are happening with YouTube gaming and everything else. So hopefully you'll stay around for the journey as we continue to grow everything here with Weave in the Void. Don't forget to check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/wandering hermit, so you can get a copy of the tabletop book, artwork from Nathan, artwork from Becca, Chris. Cool stuff all around the board. Is there anything else you want to add? We should be max level fishing from all this. I need mats for the fish feast. Remember me?
Indeed. Yeah. Make sure you hit subscribe, guys. And while we're live, make sure you hit the like button. It helps a lot. And for people that are watching later, same thing. And follow us along for the journey. This is also where we'll be doing the D&D starting this Sunday. Is that right, Rem?
Yeah, 8 p.m.s Central on Sunday nights.
So this Sunday, we'll be moving over our D&D campaign. If you missed that up till now, that's okay. We typically we do like a little catch up on where we're at, why we're at that point. And come join us because it's a ton of fun.
It is good times. So until then, everybody, thanks for